The morning sun slanted through the stained-glass windows of St. Joseph Church, casting fragments of ruby, emerald, and sapphire light across the marble floor. Angie Johnson bent over with a mop in her hands, scrubbing at a stubborn streak of wax that had dulled the shine near the entrance of the sacristy. The air smelled faintly of incense from the morning mass and of lilies that had arrived earlier for the afternoon's wedding. Her arms ached, but she kept moving, humming a soft hymn under her breath. Work was work, and Angie had learned long ago that consistency mattered more than energy. She had been cleaning this church for nearly 8 years. Faithful, dependable, invisible. Invisible was fine. Invisible meant no one questioned how many hours she worked or how much she sacrificed to keep her mother, Mary, afloat. Mary's medicines, hospital appointments, and now the surgery. Angie pushed the thought away for the 100th time that morning, but it clung to her like dust in the corners of the pews. 40,000 reis. A mountain she could never climb on her wages. She pressed harder on the mop until the wax finally gave way and the marble gleamed again, as though the stone itself had decided to pity her efforts. Behind her, the echo of hurried footsteps rang against the stone. Father Thomas, in his simple black cassock, appeared in the hallway, balancing his glasses at the end of his nose. "Angela, my dear, the florists need access to the nave. Could you open the side doors for them?" She nodded quickly, placing the mop back in its bucket. "Of course, Father. Right away. Today will be busy. Remember, it's not just any wedding." His eyes softened. Edward Valence himself. Everyone in the city already knew. The wedding of the year, they called it. Edward Valence, CEO, heir, philanthropist, the kind of man newspapers used to sell covers. And Madison Clark, now nearly Valence, a woman whose pictures filled society magazines as if she had been born for their glossy pages. Their union promised business power and social dominance, and St. Joseph Church had been chosen as the blessed stage. Angie smiled politely at Father Thomas, but his words only reminded her of her own precarious place in this grand day. She was staff, an extra pair of hands to polish the spectacle of wealth and holiness into something flawless. She tightened the bun at the back of her head and carried her keys to the heavy side doors. The florist stood outside, arms full of arrangements so extravagant they looked unreal. Orchids, roses, lilies cascading in colors that screamed money. Angie held the door wide, and they passed, thanking her without quite meeting her eyes. By mid-morning, the church buzzed with activity. Musicians rehearsed in the choir loft. Photographers tested light angles. Event planners whispered into their earpieces as if war commanders preparing for battle. Angie stayed on the edges, cleaning fingerprints off brass railings, polishing pews with a cloth until she could see her reflection in the lacquer. A part of her admired the grandeur of it all, the chandeliers lit to brilliance, the velvet cushions on the kneelers, the ancient crucifix high above the altar. But another part remained wary, as though splendor like this came with hidden claws. She was on her knees in the women's restroom, scrubbing tiles near the baseboard, when the door banged open. She jumped but quickly lowered her gaze, hoping to finish unnoticed. 2 pairs of heels clicked on the floor, and then voices filled the air, one hushed and urgent, the other smooth and laced with disdain. "Ryan, you're late," said a woman. Angie recognized the voice instantly. Madison Clark. She had heard it in society interviews on television, light and playful, but here the tone was sharp, impatient. A man answered in a careless drawl. "Relax, Mads. The groom isn't going anywhere." Angie froze, cloth in her hand. She was tucked into the narrow stall near the end, the door slightly ajar, unseen from their angle. She should have announced herself, should have made some noise, but instinct rooted her. Something in Madison's voice prickled her skin. "You know why we're doing this," Madison hissed. 2 years, that's all. I'll give him a child, he'll be thrilled, and then access to everything. Every cent, every property. Edward thinks love is enough. Poor fool. Angie's heart slammed. Her hands trembled against the damp cloth. She held her breath, straining to hear. Ryan laughed under his breath. "And then? You'll what? Ditch him with half the fortune?" "Not half," Madison said smoothly. "All of it. 500 million. Enough for us to live like royalty forever. He'll be out of the way by then. Quietly, of course. I'm not foolish. Divorce is messy. But a widow? Respected, untouchable. Angie's stomach turned. The cruelty in Madison's tone was unflinching. She wasn't speaking like a bride hours from vows. She was plotting like a strategist on the eve of conquest. Ryan muttered something inaudible, but Madison silenced him with a soft laugh. It's a business arrangement. I get what I want, you get me. And Edward? He gets a tragic legacy. The stall spun around Angie. She clamped her hand over her mouth to stop the gasp rising in her throat. She thought of Edward Valence, the handsome groom-to-be she had glimpsed once in a magazine, smiling with an earnestness that seemed uncalculated. He was about to step into a trap, and no one but she knew. Madison's heels clicked as she moved closer to the mirror, perhaps fixing her makeup. Now go. And remember, Thursdays are ours. Same hotel. He'll never notice. A pause, then a final whisper. We're almost there. The door opened and closed. Silence settled again, broken only by Angie's shallow breaths. Her body felt cold and electric all at once. She leaned back against the stall wall, eyes shut tight. What should she do? If she stayed quiet, the wedding would proceed, and a man's life would collapse without him knowing why. If she spoke up, who would believe her? She was just the cleaner, unseen, easily dismissed. But her conscience screamed too loudly to ignore. She finished scrubbing the tile with hands that shook. Her decision was already made, though fear clawed at her chest. She would tell Edward Valence. She would warn him, even if it cost her everything. The bells tolled noon. Guests in gowns and tuxedos flooded into the church, their perfumes mingling with the thick scent of flowers. Angie stood near the back, her uniform neat but plain among the glittering spectacle. She clutched her cleaning rag like a talisman, watching the procession form. Bridesmaids lined in blush silk, groomsmen in tailored suits. Photographers snapped and whispered. At last, the organ thundered. All rose as Madison Clark, in a gown dripping with pearls and lace, glided down the aisle on her father's arm. Her face was radiant, perfect for every camera angle, and only Angie knew the venom curled beneath that smile. Edward Valence waited at the altar, tall and composed, his dark hair slicked neatly, his eyes bright with anticipation. He looked at Madison as if she were the answer to every prayer. Angie's chest tightened. She could not let this happen. As the priest prepared to begin, Angie stepped forward. Her voice trembled but carried through the cavernous space. Mr. Valence, please, you can't marry her. The church gasped. Heads turned. Madison froze mid-step, her eyes narrowing like a predator's. Edward's brows furrowed in confusion. Angie's heart pounded, but she forced herself onward. She doesn't love you. She's planning to steal everything. Your money, your life. I heard her with Ryan Carter. It's all a scheme. For a moment, silence reigned, every gaze fixed on her. Then Madison dropped the bouquet. Her hand flew to her mouth, and tears welled instantly in her eyes. She turned to Edward with a sob. How could she? This woman, I don't even know her. She's jealous, trying to ruin us. On our wedding day, gasps rippled again, this time in sympathy for the bride. Edward's expression hardened, confusion shifting to anger. He looked at Angie as though she were filth dragged in from the street. Who are you? He demanded. How dare you interrupt? I'm telling the truth. Angie cried. She said, Enough. Madison's voice cracked, trembling. She leaned into Edward's chest, weeping beautifully. Please, don't let her destroy us. Security moved forward. Edward's command was ice. Remove her. Hands gripped Angie's arms, pulling her back. She twisted, trying to hold her ground. You have to believe me. Please. She'll ruin you. But the music swelled again as if nothing had happened. Madison's sobs quieted into fragile smiles, Edward's arms steady around her. Angie was dragged through the side aisle, the congregation whispering, staring at her like a madwoman. Her knees scraped against the stone when she stumbled, but no one reached to help. The doors slammed shut behind her, cutting off the vows that would soon be spoken. Outside, the air was heavy with summer heat. Angie fell onto the church steps, her chest heaving. Her world tilted, spinning with shame and disbelief. She had tried to stop a disaster, and instead, she had become one. The heat of that afternoon lingered on Angie's skin long after she had left the steps of St. Joseph Church. The whispers, the eyes, the disbelief, they clung to her like burrs on fabric. She walked home through the winding streets of the city, her uniform crumpled, her shoes worn thin, and her mind a storm of shame. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Edward's face as he looked at her. Anger, betrayal, dismissal. Not once had he paused to wonder if there was truth in her words. And Madison's tears, those flawless, manufactured tears, had drowned everything else. Her apartment was small, a second-floor unit in a crumbling building where the walls carried the faint scent of mold. She let herself in quietly, though she knew her mother would already be awake, waiting. The ticking of the old clock filled the silence until Mary Johnson's voice floated from the bedroom. "Angela, is that you?" "Yes, Mama." Angie's voice cracked. She forced brightness into it. "I'm back." Mary appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a faded shawl. Her face was thinner than it used to be, lines of pain etched into her expression. But her eyes, gentle, dark, unyielding, still held the same warmth. "How was it?" she asked softly. "The wedding of the year?" Angie hesitated. She had never lied to her mother. But what truth could she offer that wouldn't worsen the ache already gnawing at them both? Mary leaned against the frame, waiting, and Angie finally whispered, "It was too much." Mary gave a small laugh, coughing midway. "Of course it was. That kind of world isn't ours." She reached for Angie's hand. "But I'm proud of you, always. You worked so hard." The words broke something in Angie. She pulled her mother into an embrace, inhaling the scent of lavender soap that clung to her. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks, unseen. For Mary's sake, she swallowed the truth, at least for now. That night, when Mary was asleep, Angie sat alone at the tiny kitchen table. Bills were stacked neatly in a corner, like stones forming a wall she could never climb. The numbers glared at her: medications, consultations, the looming estimate for surgery. 40,000. She traced the digits with her fingertip until they blurred. Her thoughts returned to Madison's words in the bathroom. 500 million. Not 40,000, not 50, not even 100. 500 million. The contrast was grotesque. One woman planned to discard a man for money beyond imagination, while another fought desperately just to keep her mother's heart beating. Angie dropped her head into her hands. The memory of her father surfaced, unbidden. He had been a janitor too, strong and dependable, until the accident on a construction site stole him away. She was 15 then, old enough to know the hole his absence would leave, young enough to still dream he might come back. Her mother had carried on with quiet dignity, working part-time until illness clipped her strength. And Angie had stepped into her father's shoes, pushing mops instead of textbooks, building resilience where others built careers. Her father's voice, deep and certain, echoed in her mind. "Do right, Angie. Always do right, even when no one's watching." Especially then. She had tried. Today, she had tried. But the world had not rewarded her for it. The world had laughed. The days that followed were a slow unraveling. Father Thomas called her into his office on Monday. His lined face was full of regret, but his words were final. "Angela, I've had calls from the Valence family and from Mrs. Madison Clark herself. They say you disrupted the ceremony with false accusations. The parish cannot afford scandal. I'm so sorry, but we have to let you go." The blow landed like a hammer. She begged, explaining that she had only spoken what she heard, but the priest's gaze was steady with sorrow. "I believe you meant well," he said. "But meaning well is not always enough." When Angie left, her hands trembled so hard she could barely turn the key in her apartment door. Mary looked up from her chair, saw her daughter's face, and asked no questions. She only reached out, and Angie sank to her knees beside her, resting her head against her mother's lap. By the end of that week, the whispers had spread. Calls to cleaning agencies went unanswered. Interviews ended abruptly once her name was spoken. A friend at a small hotel whispered that Madison herself had phoned ahead. Crazy woman, liar, troublemaker. The label stuck. Days turned into weeks. The fridge grew emptier, the bills taller. Angie stretched groceries with creativity, watered down soup, cut fruit into smaller pieces. She sold an old gold chain of her father's to pay for prescriptions. Each night she prayed, not for herself, but for Mary. And still, Madison's laughter haunted her dreams. One afternoon, when the summer heat pressed heavy on the city, Angie walked to the bank to withdraw the last of her savings. Her shoes were worn, her dress plain, her dignity fraying but not broken. She stood in line quietly, clutching her small purse. A ripple of whispers swept through the lobby. Heads turned. Madison Valence, in a silk dress the color of wine, entered as though the world itself bent to her. She carried no purse. Others carried it for her. Jewelry gleamed at her throat and wrists, subtle but unmistakable wealth. Her gaze swept the room and landed on Angie. A slow smile curved her lips. She approached, heels clicking with deliberate rhythm, and stopped before her. "Well," Madison said sweetly, though her eyes were shards of glass. "If it isn't the prophetess of doom." Angie's breath caught. She straightened her shoulders. "I only spoke the truth." Madison laughed, a sound designed to humiliate. From her clutch, she withdrew a handful of bills and let them flutter to the floor between them. "Then here, truth teller. Buy yourself some dignity." The lobby hushed. People stared, eager for spectacle. Angie's cheeks burned, but she did not bend. She looked straight into Madison's gleaming eyes. "One day," she said softly, "you'll choke on that money." Madison's smile faltered, just for a moment. Then she turned, her entourage gathering around her like petals around a flower. She left with her laughter trailing behind her. Angie remained rooted, staring at the crumpled bills on the floor. A guard picked them up awkwardly, placing them on the counter. Angie shook her head. "Keep it," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. That night, back in her apartment, Angie sat before the mirror. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, unruly hair tied in the same bun she had worn for years, clothes that spoke of labor rather than life. Madison had taken everything, her job, her reputation, her peace. But Angie still had something Madison did not, the truth. She touched her hair, lifting a strand. Slowly, with scissors borrowed from the kitchen drawer, she cut. A lock fell into the sink. Then another. She worked steadily, methodically, until the woman staring back was someone new. Leaner, sharper, harder. The decision crystallized within her. If no one believed the words of Angela Johnson the cleaner, then perhaps they would believe someone else. A new woman. A new plan. She whispered to her reflection, voice low but fierce. "I will not let you win, Madison. Not while my mother's life depends on it. Not while I still breathe." Outside, the city hummed, indifferent. Inside, Angie's heart hardened into resolve. The past had shaped her. The present had broken her. But the future, yes, the future would be hers to carve. And somewhere, deep in her chest, the echo of her father's voice answered back, "Do right, Angie. Even when no one's watching." This time, she swore, the world would be forced to watch. The summer had begun to fade into late afternoons of long shadows, but for Angela Johnson, days and weeks blurred together with the same dull ache. The sting of humiliation at St. Joseph Church clung to her skin as though it had been tattooed there. She thought of Edward Valence, his stern dismissal, and Madison's triumphant tears almost hourly, and each time her heart pounded, as if reliving the moment. She could have let it go. That was what Father Thomas had implied. Meaning well is not enough. But something in Angie resisted surrender. She had seen too much, heard too much. If she did nothing, she would become complicit in Madison's scheme. And wasn't silence just another form of betrayal? So Angie wrote a letter. Her handwriting, neat but urgent, filled 3 pages. She described the overheard conversation in detail, Madison's plan to have a child, her promises to Ryan Carter, the Thursday meetings, the mention of $500 million. She wrote of her loyalty to truth, of her father's lessons about integrity. She folded the sheets into an envelope and wrote in steady block letters, "For Mr. Edward Valence." The next morning, she dressed carefully in her plainest but cleanest dress. She rehearsed her words. "I only want you to be safe. Please read this before it's too late." She walked to the headquarters of Valence Constructions, a skyscraper of glass and steel that seemed to scrape the sky itself. Inside, the lobby smelled of polish and power. Men in tailored suits crossed paths with women in sharp heels, their faces focused, their voices quick. Angie felt her heart shrink beneath their stares. Still, she approached the reception desk. The receptionist looked at her uniform and frowned. "Can I help you?" I need to leave this for Mr. Valence," Angie said, offering the envelope with both hands. The woman glanced at it as though it were dirty. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's important. Please. It's about his safety. Security." The word was clipped, automatic. A tall guard appeared at once. "Escort her out." Angie's breath hitched. "No, wait," I'm not dangerous. This is, she tried to explain, but the guard was firm, steering her toward the glass doors. I only want him to know the truth, she cried. Heads turned. Someone chuckled. The guard dropped the envelope into a bin behind the counter as if it were trash. The doors closed behind her. The skyscraper loomed above, indifferent. Angie stood on the pavement, the roar of traffic swallowing her words. Her hands trembled as though she had committed a crime instead of a kindness. The following week brought more blows. Word spread faster than she could imagine. Cleaning agencies that once relied on her said they had no openings. Hotels she had called before now said, "We've heard of you. We're not interested." Even the small grocery store where she sometimes filled in as a stalker shook its head. Too much risk, Angie. Sorry. She walked home each night with the weight of rejection pressing on her chest. Inside the apartment, she smiled at Mary, but her mother's sharp eyes noticed everything. You're eating less, Mary murmured one evening as they sat with bowls of thin soup. I'm fine. Angie forced a spoonful to her lips. Mary reached across the table, her hand fragile against her daughter's. I don't need riches, Angie. I need you. Promise me you won't burn yourself away trying to fix the world. Angie squeezed her hand back, blinking fast. She wanted to say, but if I don't fight, who will protect you? But she only nodded. One morning, an envelope slid under their apartment door. Angie bent to pick it up, her stomach sinking. The letterhead gleamed gold, Valence Legal Affairs. Inside, cold words cut deeper than any blade. Ms. Johnson, your repeated attempts to defame Mrs. Madison Clark Volas constitute harassment and slander. Any further intrusion upon the privacy or reputation of the Valence family will result in legal action. Cease immediately. It was signed by a lawyer whose name reeked of prestige. Angie sank onto the floor, letter clutched in her hands. So now she was not only unemployed but threatened. She imagined men in suits dragging her to court, demanding fines she could never pay. She thought of her mother's medicine bottles, nearly empty. Defeat pressed her down until she could hardly breathe. That night, as Mary slept, Angie sat at the window, staring at the street lamps below. Maybe they're right, she thought bitterly. Maybe I am nothing but a crazy woman shouting into the void. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, smaller than she remembered. Meanwhile, in the Valence penthouse, Edward himself sat alone in his study. The wedding was 2 weeks behind him, yet Madison was already distant, her smiles reserved for cameras, her evenings often spent away on vague excuses. He tried to dismiss his unease. Yet, in quiet moments, the memory of that cleaning woman at the altar returned. Her voice had been desperate, not rehearsed. Her eyes, pleading, almost broken. He had dismissed her as an intruder, but why had her words clung to him? Edward rubbed his temples, exhaustion weighing on him. He wanted to ask Madison directly, but every time he tried, she turned the subject into laughter or indignation. Darling, don't let jealous women poison your mind, she'd say, kissing his cheek. Still, the echo lingered. She'll ruin you. He poured himself a drink, staring into the amber liquid. Could it be true? No. Impossible. Madison was beautiful, clever, ambitious, but loyal, surely. And yet, the uncertainty gnawed at him, quiet but persistent. For Angie, the world narrowed further. Bills stacked higher. Mary's heart palpitations grew more frequent, each episode a reminder of the ticking clock. Angie pawned her father's watch, the last heirloom she had kept, to pay for an urgent consultation. She returned home late one evening, only to find a crowd gathered outside the building. Madison stood at the curb in a designer dress, her laughter echoing, a group of friends circling her like courtiers. Angie tried to slip past unseen, but Madison spotted her. Look who it is, Madison called, her voice sharp as glass. The mad prophetess. The crowd laughed. Angie froze, humiliated. Madison stepped closer, producing a single note from her clutch, 100 reis. She dropped it on the ground at Angie's feet. Fetch, if you're so desperate. Angie's face burned. She did not move. Slowly, she looked Madison in the eyes. One day, the truth will find you, she whispered. Madison's smile flickered, but she quickly turned back to her friends, who roared with laughter. Angie climbed the stairs, her chest tight, her ears filled with their cruel mirth. That night, Angie sat at the kitchen table long after Mary had gone to bed. The defeat was almost complete. She had lost her job, her reputation, her chance to warn Edward, even her dignity in front of strangers. Tears blurred the bills spread before her. She pressed her hands to her face. What more can I do? Her father's words came back faintly, but this time they felt far away. Do right, even when no one's watching. But what if no one would ever listen? Angie leaned against the window, staring at the stars she could barely see beyond the city lights. A thought curled at the edges of her mind, dangerous but irresistible. If the world saw only a poor cleaner, then maybe she needed to become someone else entirely. The night Angie finally broke her silence to herself, she knew there was no turning back. The mirror no longer reflected the submissive cleaner who had been dismissed at the altar. It showed a woman sharpened by humiliation, fueled by desperation, and carved into resolve by grief. Cut hair framed her face in jagged edges, as though she had sliced away the years of invisibility. She had begun running at dawn, circling the cracked pavement of the neighborhood, shedding weight, shedding weakness. The reflection that now met her was not the Angie who once bent quietly with mop in hand, but someone harder, leaner, someone who could slip into enemy territory unnoticed. Her plan crystallized one sleepless night as she spread newspaper clippings across the table. Valence Constructions, expansion in Latin America. Edward Valence visits orphanage in Rio. Charity branch hints at new foundation director. The company was an empire of concrete and glass, but also of people, hundreds of them, from executives in tailored suits to janitors sweeping the lobby. And there, between those layers, Angie saw her entry point. She forged a resume, not lies, only omissions. Experience as a cleaner in private institutions, religious establishments, and corporate facilities. No mention of St. Joseph. She knew Madison's reach, knew that the name Angela Johnson had been blackened. So she signed a different name, Angela Marie Jones. Close enough that she could still answer naturally, far enough to slip past background whispers. The morning she walked into Valence Construction's headquarters, nerves burned through her. Carmen Diaz, the head of executive maintenance, sat across from her with a clipboard. Carmen was mid-40s, with eyes that could flay a liar but hands that offered steady help when deserved. You've worked nights before? Carmen asked, her accent rolling lightly. Yes, Angie replied, her voice calm, her new cropped hair tucked behind her ears. Discreet. As a shadow. Carmen studied her a long moment, then nodded. Fine. Executive floor needs another hand. Pays better, expectations higher. Don't gossip, don't snoop. You work clean, you stay. Angie's throat tightened with gratitude. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Carmen said dryly. Executives can be wolves. We're the sheepdogs. Stay sharp. Thus, by the turn of a week, Angela Johnson, shamed, fired, humiliated, became Angela Jones, cleaner of the executive floor of Valence Constructions. The first days were a test of nerves. She learned the rhythm of the office, the early rustle of assistants with coffee trays, the clipped heels of lawyers moving between meetings, the constant hum of air conditioning that carried whispers of power. Edward Valence himself she saw only in glimpses. Tall, weary-eyed, his once sure stride slowed into something heavier. And then there was Madison. Madison arrived rarely, but when she did, the air changed. Perfume like crushed roses trailed behind her, and conversations hushed into silence. Angie kept her gaze lowered, but each time Madison passed, she felt her pulse in her throat. Would Madison recognize her? Would one slip of the eyes give her away? But Madison never looked at cleaners. Not once. It was on a Thursday evening that Angie noticed it. Edward had retreated early from meetings, his face tight, while Madison, claiming errands, swept out with unusual haste. Angie, gathering trash bags, overheard Carly Brooks, the young assistant with sharp eyes and sharper wit, muttering, "Always Thursdays. Always at 5. The pieces clicked. Madison and Ryan. The hotel. Thursdays. That night, as she emptied bins in Edward's private office, Angie's hand froze. Among scattered papers lay a photograph face down. She picked it up carefully. Madison, younger, leaning into Ryan's chest, both sunburned, a beach sprawled behind them. Scrawled in blue ink, Cabo Frio, 2023. Her heart thudded. Proof. Not enough to convict, but enough to connect the whispers in the bathroom to the woman in pearls. Angie slid the photo back exactly as it had lain. She could not reveal herself yet. Not without a net. But the twist had come. She was inside now, unseen, with the enemy's mask beginning to crack. That night, Angie lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since her disgrace at the church, she felt not despair but momentum. Madison thought she had won. Edward thought she was gone. The world thought she was irrelevant. But the game had only just begun. Edward Valence had grown leaner in the weeks since his wedding. He still commanded boardrooms with his measured voice and sharp intellect, but in private, shadows darkened his eyes. The charity projects he once championed with energy now seemed half-hearted. His colleagues noticed. Carly Brooks noticed most of all. Carly was 23, whip-smart, often underestimated because of her youth. She had been Edward's assistant for 2 years, and she had seen him at his best, patient, earnest, determined to honor his father's legacy. But lately, she saw only doubt and exhaustion. She also noticed Madison's absences. The careful excuses, the Thursday patterns, the perfume lingering on Edward's coats but never matching the one she wore. Carly's instincts told her something was wrong, but her loyalty to Edward stopped her from gossiping. Still, suspicion gnawed. One Thursday evening, long after most employees had left, Carly stayed behind to organize files. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement by the elevators. Madison, disguised in oversized sunglasses, slipping into the corridor with haste. Carly's curiosity surged. She followed at a distance, heart hammering, until she saw Madison step into the back seat of a waiting car. Beside her, unmistakable even in the dim light, was Ryan Carter. Carly pulled out her phone with trembling hands. One photo, blurry but damning. Madison leaning into Ryan, laughter frozen mid-flash. Carly's throat tightened. What did it mean? Did Edward know? Meanwhile, Angie's presence on the executive floor began to carve new ripples. Carmen Diaz, ever watchful, had grown to trust her efficiency. "You're quick," Carmen said one night, handing her an extra set of keys. "Office 7. Confidential. Don't touch the desk drawers." "Yes, ma'am," Angie replied, though her mind burned with questions. She learned to move silently, to blend into walls, to catch fragments of conversations. From suits in the hallway, she heard mention of Madison requesting new powers of attorney, just for convenience. From assistants, she overheard whispers of bank transfers. Each piece was a thread, and Angie began weaving them into a net. Yet she could not do it alone. Late one evening, as Angie wheeled her cart through the deserted hall, Carly appeared, files pressed to her chest. The young woman hesitated, then said, "You're new here, right?" Angie forced a small smile. "Angela Jones." Carly studied her, eyes sharp. "Strange thing. You don't act like most of the staff. You watch. You listen." Angie's stomach tightened. Had she been discovered? But Carly only sighed. "Maybe that's a good thing, because I think something's wrong with Mrs. Valence." Angie's pulse raced. She wanted to confess everything, but caution held her. Instead, she said, "What makes you think that?" Carly glanced down the corridor, lowering her voice. "I saw her. With another man. I have a photo." The words struck Angie like lightning. Here, finally, was an ally. Her throat dry, she whispered, "Keep it safe. Someday soon, Mr. Valence will need to see it. And when he does, the truth will matter." Carly searched her face, then nodded. "I don't know why I trust you, but I do." Madison, oblivious, continued to spin her webs. She visited Edward's office with affectionate smiles, pressing him to sign papers granting her broader financial access. "It's just efficiency, darling," she said, brushing his cheek. "We're a team now." Edward, wearied and distracted, signed. And with a flourish of her pen, Madison secured the tools of betrayal. Only Angie and Carly stood between Edward and the ruin already advancing toward him. The city hummed with its usual rhythm of ambition, horns blaring on avenues, glass towers glowing against the dusk, but within the Valence headquarters, darker currents moved unseen. Angie had been working there for nearly a month under her new name, and every day was a careful balance between invisibility and vigilance. Carmen Diaz trusted her now. "You're not like the others," Carmen said one night as they walked the polished corridor together. "Most just clean what's in front of them. You see the whole picture. I like that, but it's also dangerous. Don't let curiosity get you fired." Angie lowered her eyes, masking the storm in her chest. "I'll be careful." Still, curiosity was her weapon. She had pieced together enough whispers to know Madison's game was in motion. New procurements of financial access, secretive meetings, suspicious absences. But suspicion was not enough. Proof mattered. That Thursday, fate intervened. Edward left the office earlier than usual, shoulders hunched. Angie lingered on the executive floor, polishing brass handles she had already polished twice. She noticed Madison glide through the lobby, her laughter like shards of glass. Not an hour later, Carly Brooks appeared at Angie's cart, her expression pale. I followed her, Carly whispered. To the Park Regent Hotel. He was there. Ryan Carter. They weren't even hiding. She pulled her phone from her pocket, trembling. On the screen, a photograph clearer than before. Madison in Ryan's arms, her lips pressed to his cheek, champagne glasses between them. Angie's throat tightened. You have no idea what you've done, she breathed. I did it for Edward, Carly replied. He's blind right now. But this is light. Angie nodded slowly. Keep it safe. It's not just about an affair. It's more. Much more. Carly frowned. What do you mean? Angie hesitated, the weight of secrecy pressing hard. She wanted to tell Carly everything. That she was the same woman who had been thrown out of the church, the one Madison had destroyed. But trust was fragile. One wrong word could shatter everything. Just be careful, she said instead. Meanwhile, Madison moved with increasing boldness. She had convinced Edward to sign another set of documents. New power of attorney, new access codes. Edward's signature flowed almost without thought. He wanted peace, wanted to believe in her. But doubt lingered. One night, as Edward reviewed old files in his study, he found the photo of Madison with Ryan, the one from Cabo Frio, that he had once dismissed as a forgotten relic. Now, with Angie's accusations echoing faintly in memory, it gnawed at him. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring at the smiling faces, unease tightening his chest. But before suspicion could harden, Madison walked in, radiant, laughing. She pressed herself against him, whispering of love, distracting him with lips and perfume. The photograph slipped back into the drawer, unresolved. Angie's greatest secret, however, weighed heavier each day. Her mother. Mary Johnson's health was failing quickly. Nights brought shortness of breath, tightness in her chest, moments where Angie feared the worst. She rationed medication, begged pharmacists for discounts, pawned another heirloom. The surgery estimate remained the immovable mountain, $40,000. Every time Angie mopped the marble of Valence headquarters, she thought, Madison is planning to steal $500 million while my mother may die for lack of $40,000. The injustice burned hotter than fire. She would not allow it. Late one night, as Angie finished dusting Edward's office, she heard footsteps. Carly appeared in the doorway. You're always here late, Carly observed. So are you, Angie replied gently. Carly hesitated, then sat on the edge of the desk. I've been thinking. About you. About all this. I don't know why, but I feel like you understand more than you say. Angie met her gaze, steady. I understand betrayal. I understand what it feels like to be dismissed when you're telling the truth. Carly studied her, silent, then whispered, Who are you really? Angie's heart raced. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, she answered, Someone who wants justice. Carly nodded slowly. Then we're the same. She reached into her bag, drawing out the printed photo. She laid it on the desk between them. Let's make sure he sees this, before it's too late. The secret, once buried, was now shared. The following week began like any other. Executives marching through corridors, secretaries balancing schedules, cleaners vanishing into corners. But beneath the surface, currents shifted. Carly had shown Angie the photo again, crisp against the paper. Together they whispered plans and shadows. If we present it now, he might still dismiss it, Carly reasoned. We need more. Something undeniable. Angie agreed. And we must be ready for her retaliation. Madison destroys anyone who threatens her. The decision was made. Gather more proof, then strike. But fate was swifter. On Wednesday, Edward signed another document Madison placed before him. This one granting her access to transfer funds from several corporate accounts. He hesitated briefly, his pen hovering. Darling, it's just temporary, Madison cooed. For some renovations at the charity branch. I'll handle the details so you can rest. Edward exhaled, weary, and signed. By Friday, 500,000 reis were gone. vanished into accounts no one could trace. Edward discovered it late at night, in his office, staring at screens filled with red numbers. Panic surged. He called Madison's phone. No answer. He called again, straight to voicemail. Carly, summoned urgently, rushed into his office. She found him pale, sweating, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. She took it, he said through clenched teeth. She stole from me. Carly's mind raced. This was it, the proof. She reached into her bag, pulled out the photo, and laid it on his desk. Edward stared at it, his eyes widening. Cabo Frio, he murmured. Ryan Carter. Carly swallowed. She's been with him all along. Thursdays. Hotels. I saw it myself. Edward's hand clenched into a fist. His world tilted. The woman he had defended, adored, dismissed his doubts for, was the thief. And then Carly said softly, "There's someone else you need to know about." When Angie was summoned to Edward's office that night, her heart hammered so violently she thought she might collapse. Carmen had told her, "Mr. Valence wants to see you." Alone. She entered cautiously, head bowed, the weight of her disguise pressing hard. Edward stood by the window, the city lights burning behind him. On his desk lay the photo, the bank statements, the fragments of his broken trust. He turned slowly, his gaze sharp. "You." Angie froze. "You're the woman from the church," Edward said, his voice low, heavy with revelation. "The one who tried to warn me." Her breath caught. "Yes." The silence stretched, thick with memory. Edward's fists tightened, then released. "I thought you were mad. I threw you out. I let her destroy you." His voice cracked with guilt. "And you were right." Angie's throat ached. "It doesn't matter. What matters is stopping her before she ruins everything, and before she ruins you." For the first time, Edward looked at her not as an intruder, not as a liar, but as an ally. His jaw set. "Then we stop her. Together." That night marked the point of no return. Angie was no longer just a cleaner. Carly was no longer just an assistant. Edward was no longer a blind husband. They were a coalition forged in betrayal, bound by the need for truth. And Madison Clark Velas had no idea the trap was beginning to close around her. The alliance was fragile at first, bound more by necessity than trust. Edward, shaken to his core, struggled with the weight of realization. He had believed in Madison with a faith almost sacred, had tied not only his fortune but his heart to her. Now, staring at the numbers on his screens, at the photo Carly had provided, at the quiet determination in Angie's eyes, he felt both fury and shame. "I should have seen it," he muttered, pacing his office. "My father warned me once. Ambition can wear the mask of love. I didn't listen." "You wanted to believe," Angie said softly. She stood near the door, her uniform a reminder of how low Madison had pushed her. "That isn't a crime. It's human." Edward looked at her, a bitter smile twitching on his lips. "You paid the price for my blindness." The words stung, but Angie didn't let it show. "We can't go back. We can only move forward." Carly, perched on the edge of the desk, interjected. "We need a plan. If we go public without enough evidence, Madison will spin the story. She's good at that. She'll cry, make you the villain, and Angie the crazy woman all over again. We need her to expose herself." Edward nodded slowly, his mind already calculating. "She's proud, arrogant. If we push the right buttons, she'll reveal more than she intends." But the consequences of their choices arrived faster than expected. The next morning, whispers ran through the building. Madison had vanished. Her phone disconnected, her penthouse empty. Rumors spread. She was in Sao Paulo, in Buenos Aires, in Paris. The truth was simpler. 500,000 reais had been siphoned into offshore accounts, and Madison had gone to ground. For Edward, it was a scandal waiting to ignite. He convened his legal team, but the lawyers were cautious. Without hard evidence tying her to the theft, pursuing charges could backfire. "The press would devour you, sir. Better to handle this quietly." Edward dismissed them, frustration boiling. Quiet was no longer an option. Angie, meanwhile, faced her own fallout. Mary's condition worsened. One night, Angie returned home to find her mother collapsed on the floor, gasping for air. Panic ripped through her as she dialed for an ambulance, her hands trembling. Hours later, in a sterile hospital room, the doctor's verdict was grim. She needs surgery within weeks. Without it, the risk is fatal. 40,000. Always 40,000. Angie sat at her mother's bedside, her hand clasped in Mary's frail fingers. "I'll find a way," she whispered fiercely. "I promise." Mary opened her eyes weakly. "Don't sell your soul, Angie. Not for me." Angie forced a smile, though tears burned her cheeks. "I'll only sell lies, Mama. And Madison has plenty of those to spare." Back at Valence headquarters, the tension grew unbearable. Edward's board of directors demanded explanations. "Your wife's disappearance reflects poorly on the company," one gray-haired executive said sternly. "If you cannot control your personal life, how can you lead us?" Edward's jaw tightened. "My personal life is my own. What matters is this company's integrity, and I intend to defend it." But the whispers continued. Stocks wavered. Investors hesitated. Madison's absence, far from solving problems, created new ones. It was Carly who brought the idea. "What if we don't chase her? What if we draw her back? If she thinks she's untouchable, she'll want to return to flaunt it. That's when we strike." Angie leaned forward. "She thrives on spectacle. If we give her an audience, she won't resist." Edward frowned. "And you propose we bait her?" Carly smiled grimly. "Exactly. We let her think she's still in control. We leak a dinner invitation, a gala, something she can't ignore. Her vanity will do the rest." Edward exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "If we fail, she ruins us all." Angie's voice was steady. "If we don't try, she wins anyway." The decision was made. The trap would be set. But in the shadows, unexpected consequences brewed. Madison, watching from afar, had already heard whispers of Edward's doubt, of cleaners who lingered too long, of assistants too curious. She lifted her glass of champagne in a foreign hotel room, smirking at Ryan. "They think they can corner me," she said. "But I wrote this game, and I never lose." The gala was planned swiftly. Edward announced it as a charity dinner for the Valence Foundation, a night of wealth and benevolence. Invitations spread through the city's elite like sparks on dry wood. It was the kind of event Madison had once orchestrated herself, and Edward knew she would not resist reclaiming the spotlight. In the days leading up, Angie worked tirelessly behind the scenes, helping Carmen's crew prepare the venue. Chandeliers polished, silver cutlery gleaming, linens starched until stiff. But beneath the surface of duty, her mind raced. Every corner polished was another step toward revelation. Carly coordinated quietly, ensuring Madison would hear of the event. She let slip a confidential memo in a place Madison's old spies still roamed. By the second day, whispers confirmed it. Madison knew. But while preparations advanced, Angie faced a revelation of her own. One evening, as she tidied Edward's office, she found an old box tucked into the corner of a cabinet. Dust layered its lid. Against her better judgment, she opened it. Inside lay letters, her father's handwriting unmistakable. Confusion seized her. She lifted one, eyes scanning the words. "To Thomas Valence," it began. Angie's breath caught. Her father had written to Edward's father? Dozens of letters lay inside, detailing construction projects, safety warnings, pleas for better working conditions. And then, her father's final words before the accident that had killed him. "If corners are cut again, lives will be lost. Including mine." Her knees buckled. She understood now. Her father had died on a Valence site, and the Valence patriarch had known. The past and present collided brutally. Edward's family had indirectly destroyed hers. She staggered back, tears blurring her vision. The man she had allied with, the man she had begun to trust, was heir to the empire that had killed her father. The truth was buried, forgotten in a box of dust. But now it roared through her veins like fire. Later that night, she confronted Edward. He was alone, reviewing figures, when she placed the letter on his desk. His eyes scanned it, confusion deepening, then horror dawning. This was your father?" "Yes." Her voice shook with restrained fury. "And your family ignored him. He warned you. He begged for safety. And he died because profit mattered more." Edward's face drained of color. He sank into his chair, the weight of guilt crushing him. "I didn't know. I swear to you, Angie, I didn't know. My father," his voice broke. "I can't undo what he did." Angie's hands trembled. "I fought to save you because it was right. But never forget, you are part of the machine that destroyed my family." Silence stretched, heavy with pain. Finally, Edward whispered, "Then let me make it right. Let me atone. Help me expose Madison, and I promise, I will rebuild what my father broke." Angie searched his eyes, torn between rage and reluctant hope. For her mother's sake, for the truth's sake, she nodded slowly. But inside, she knew, the battlefield had widened. It was no longer just Madison against her. It was the Valence name itself, both enemy and ally. The night of the gala loomed like a storm on the horizon. Preparations had stretched nerves thin, staff working late to polish every chandelier crystal, musicians rehearsing in corners, chefs perfecting menus designed to dazzle. But beneath the glamour, a silent war brewed. For Edward, the event was a mask. To the world, it was philanthropy, charity, a demonstration of Valence benevolence. But in truth, it was a battlefield. He rehearsed his role carefully. The gracious host, the noble heir, the wronged but resilient husband. Inside, however, he trembled. He had built skyscrapers, commanded boardrooms, negotiated with heads of state, but never had he faced an enemy in his own bed. Angie moved among the preparations unnoticed, her uniform blending with Carmen's crew. She checked tablecloths, arranged flowers, swept unseen corners. Yet every movement carried double meaning. She wasn't just preparing a gala, she was laying a trap. Carly flitted between staff and executives, phone in hand, orchestrating details with quiet precision. She had placed Madison's bait where it would sting most. Whispers through old acquaintances, an open channel to a gossip columnist who always fed Madison's vanity. The news of Edward's triumphant gala had spread like wildfire. By now, Madison would know, and she would come. Still, doubt not at them. In a quiet corner of the ballroom, Angie leaned against a polished pillar, whispering to Carly. What if she doesn't show? What if she's too smart for this? Carly shook her head firmly. She's not smart enough to resist being the center of attention. Pride will drag her through those doors. Angie wanted to believe it, but her chest tightened. Madison wasn't just prideful, she was dangerous. Hours before the gala, Angie visited her mother at the hospital. Mary's cheeks were pale, her breath shallow, but her eyes lit when Angie entered. You look tired, Mary whispered, squeezing her daughter's hand. You're working too much again. Angie sat carefully on the edge of the bed, forcing a smile. It's worth it. Soon we'll have what we need. Mary studied her face, recognizing the storm beneath. Promise me you won't lose yourself in their battles. You are more than their lies, more than their wealth. I promise, Angie said, though her heart faltered. She kissed her mother's forehead, inhaling the faint scent of lavender soap, imprinting it in memory. As she left, Angie swore silently. This fight wasn't just about Madison anymore. It was about her father's forgotten warnings, about her mother's survival, about dignity for those the powerful crushed beneath their heels. By dusk, the ballroom glittered. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over silk-draped tables, and the city's elite poured in, adorned in jewels and smiles. Waiters floated with trays of champagne, and cameras flashed as Edward greeted guests. He wore his mask well, charming, composed, unflinching. Yet beneath his smile, his mind raced, repeating the plan. Madison would come. When she did, they would corner her, not with force, but with truth exposed before the very people she craved. Angie lingered at the edges, her gaze never straying far from Edward. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Tonight could change everything, or destroy them all. And then, as though conjured by anticipation, she appeared. Madison Valence swept into the room in scarlet silk, diamonds glittering at her throat. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She was radiant, untouchable, the picture of triumphant defiance. On her arm was Ryan Carter, smug in a tailored suit. Whispers erupted. Wasn't she supposed to be abroad? Hadn't she abandoned her husband? Yet here she was, daring, smiling, drinking in the scandal like wine. Edward froze for only a moment before regaining his mask. Madison, he said loudly, enough for nearby guests to hear. I didn't expect you. Her smile sharpened. Darling, how could I miss the celebration of our empire? Their eyes locked, hers glittering with mockery, his steady with controlled fury. The stage was set. The first hour of the gala unfolded with brittle politeness. Madison circulated through the crowd with Ryan at her side, whispering into ears, laughing too loudly, ensuring every camera caught her brilliance. Edward moved separately, shaking hands, his mask unshaken. But tension grew with each passing minute, a coil winding tighter. Angie watched from the periphery, polishing a glass already spotless. Her eyes never left Madison. She had expected arrogance, but the sheer audacity left her breathless. Madison wasn't hiding. She was flaunting. To the elite gathered there, it looked like confidence. To Angie, it looked like madness. Finally, Edward raised his glass and called for attention. The room quieted, the clinking of cutlery fading. He spoke smoothly, his voice carrying. Tonight, we gather not only to support the Valence Foundation, but to honor truth, resilience, and the responsibility of power. Our family has built much, but tonight is about more than buildings. It is about integrity. Madison tilted her head, smirking, sipping champagne. Edward continued, his gaze sweeping the room. Integrity is fragile. It can be stolen, manipulated, hidden behind veils of beauty and charm. But eventually, the truth always emerges. Whispers stirred. Madison's smile tightened. And then Carly stepped forward, her phone in hand. "With permission, sir," she said softly but firmly. She turned her screen toward the nearest table, where journalists and donors craned their necks. On it glowed the photo, Madison and Ryan at the hotel, arms entwined, champagne glasses raised. Gasps exploded. Madison's laugh rang out, sharp as a blade. "Really, Edward? Is this your evidence? A single photo? I was meeting a family friend. How desperate you must be." Ryan shifted uncomfortably at her side, but Madison gripped his arm, eyes glittering. Edward's voice cut through. "And what about the missing funds? $500,000 Reyes, gone days after you secured new access." The crowd erupted again. Faces turned, whispers sharpened. Madison's mask slipped, just slightly. "You signed those documents," she snapped. "You gave me power. Don't blame me for using it better than you ever could." Her words echoed, damning in their arrogance. Guests froze. Even Ryan flinched. Angie stepped forward then, her voice steady though her heart thundered. "It's not power you wanted, Madison. It's destruction. You planned this from the beginning. Marry, take everything, and discard him. I heard you. I warned him. And you silenced me with lies." All eyes turned to Angie. Recognition rippled. The mad cleaner from the wedding, now standing calm and resolute. Madison's face twisted, fury breaking through her charm. "You," she hissed. "You should have stayed in the gutter where you belong." The crowd recoiled at her venom. Cameras flashed. Whispers became condemnation. Edward's voice rose above the noise, clear and unshaken. "This is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. My wife did not come here tonight to celebrate charity. She came to flaunt theft, betrayal, and deceit. She believed she was untouchable. But even diamonds crack." Madison's composure shattered. Her laugh turned brittle, her words sharp. "I deserve it all. Every cent, every stone, every ounce of respect this city offers. He was too blind, too weak to wield it. It should be mine." The admission rang like thunder. Silence followed, heavier than any sound. Edward lowered his glass. "Then let the world judge." Madison, breathing hard, realized too late what she had done. Cameras had captured everything. Her face drained of triumph, replaced with fear. Ryan slipped from her side, vanishing into the crowd. For the first time, Madison Clark Velas was truly alone. By morning, headlines flooded newspapers and social feeds. Madison Valence exposed. Fortune, betrayal, and scandal. Gala turns into confession of the year. Cleaner's warning proven true. Clips of Madison's outbursts circulated endlessly, her shrill voice declaring she deserved it all. No amount of spin could erase what the cameras had captured. Edward Valence, for once, did not shield her. He issued a calm statement. Integrity is the foundation of trust. Betrayal, even from those closest, cannot be excused. He stopped short of pressing charges, but his silence about the stolen money spoke volumes. The elite, once eager to bask in Madison's glow, now shunned her. Invitations evaporated. Business allies recoiled. Charities rejected her name. She returned to her penthouse only to find it eerily empty. Ryan Carter had fled, leaving only a note scrawled with cowardice. It was fun while it lasted. Don't call me. Madison's diamonds dulled quickly when no one cared to look at them. For Angie, the days following the gala blurred with relief and exhaustion. She still worked quietly on the executive floor, but no one looked at her as they once had. Whispers of the cleaner who was right all along floated through corridors. Even Carmen Diaz, usually unflinching, gave her a rare smile. Edward summoned her to his office 3 days later. He stood by the window, city sprawling beneath him, and when he turned, his expression carried something new: respect, humility, and a trace of guilt. "You saved me," he said simply. Angie shook her head. "I tried to save you long ago. You didn't believe me. And that will be my shame to carry," Edward replied softly. "But you gave me a second chance. I don't intend to waste it." He crossed the room, holding out a folder. Inside were documents, an official offer. Director of Operations, Valence Foundation. Angie blinked, stunned. "I'm a cleaner. I don't belong." "You're the most resilient, ethical, and determined person I know," Edward interrupted. "The foundation needs someone who understands struggle, who fights for truth. Who better than you?" Tears pricked her eyes. "I don't have the education. Then we'll get it for you. We'll build it together." His voice was steady, but his gaze was earnest. "This isn't charity, Angie. It's recognition." Her throat tightened. Slowly, she nodded. 2 weeks later, Mary Johnson was wheeled into surgery. Edward had personally ensured the hospital's best team was assigned, the bills discreetly covered. Angie sat outside the operating room, Carly by her side, hands clasped, praying silently. Hours crawled by. Finally, the surgeon emerged, mask lowered, eyes crinkling in relief. "It went well. She'll recover." Angie broke into tears she hadn't allowed herself in years, sobbing into Carly's arms. When she was finally permitted inside, Mary looked fragile but alive, color already seeping back into her cheeks. "You did it," Mary whispered, her voice raspy. "You saved me." Angie kissed her hand, tears falling freely. "No, Mama. We saved each other." Months passed. The Valence Foundation, under Angie's direction, launched new projects: scholarships for underprivileged students, housing reforms, healthcare initiatives for families like hers. The work was grueling but fulfilling. Angie threw herself into it, her father's words guiding every decision. Do right, even when no one's watching. And Edward was always near. At first, their interactions were professional, cautious, the bond of allies forged in fire. But slowly, moments softened, shared laughter over late-night planning sessions, quiet walks after board meetings, conversations that stretched into dawn. Trust, once shattered, rebuilt itself in unexpected ways. Affection bloomed like a fragile flower pushing through concrete. As for Madison, her name became a cautionary tale. The woman who once commanded every room now sat alone in a modest apartment, her jewels sold, her friends vanished. She still scrolled through gossip columns at night, seeing her own face only in "Where Are They Now?" articles. She would scoff aloud, but sometimes, late, when no one was watching, tears slipped down her cheeks. Pride had been her kingdom, and it had devoured her whole. 1 year later, St. Joseph Church rang with bells once more. The same stained glass windows blazed with ruby and sapphire light, but this time, the pews filled with joy instead of scandal. Angela Johnson walked down the aisle, no longer invisible, no longer bowed. Her gown was simple, elegant, white silk flowing with grace. At the altar, Edward Valence waited, not as a man blinded by charm, but as one who had learned humility, truth, and love through pain. Mary sat in the front pew, tears in her eyes but health in her cheeks. Carly, radiant in a pale blue dress, clasped Carmen's hand tightly. Even Father Thomas, who had once dismissed Angie with sorrow, smiled warmly as he presided. When Edward took Angie's hand, the congregation rose, and the air filled with reverence. Their vows were simple, unadorned, but every word rang true. And somewhere, far away in a small apartment, Madison watched the broadcast alone. The camera lingered on Angie's radiant smile, Edward's steady gaze, the applause of the crowd. Madison's fingers trembled around the remote. She whispered bitterly, "It should have been me." But no one heard. No one cared. As the bells tolled, Angie and Edward stepped into sunlight together. For her, it was not just a marriage. It was vindication, rebirth, and hope. For him, it was redemption. For both, it was the beginning of new horizons. And in that moment, with confetti drifting through the air and Mary's smile shining brighter than the stained glass itself, Angie knew she had done right. Even when no one believed her. Especially then. The world was watching now. If you made it this far, leave us a comment telling us where you're watching from today and what you thought of the story. If you can, Share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to receive new videos. A big hug, and see you tomorrow.